Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock and we are live. Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock and we are live. Welcome to V-Talks. I'm your host, Veronica Brockwell. Well, welcome back to part 3 of our 3-part series, Raising Good Humans. And tonight, with part 3, we are focusing on young adults, and it's called Failure to Launch, Addressing the Needs of Transition Age Children and into Adulthood. So I am very excited to welcome back to V-Talks, Brianne Leenkamp and Hannah Chapman from SEAHORSE Behavioral.
Thanks for having us.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Welcome back, ladies. I always enjoy spending our Tuesday nights together.
Same.
Awesome. So before we get started, as I always ask you to kind of introduce yourselves to anyone that maybe is new to our podcast. Brianne, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I'm Brianne Leenkamp. I'm an adult nurse practitioner and a psychiatric nurse practitioner, the owner of SEAHORSE Behavioral, and we're located in Marion, opening a second location in Middleborough, and really happy to be here. And Hannah is one of my colleagues that works here at the office with me.
All right, you're up, Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I've been working with Brianne for like 2.5 years now, with a kind of have a background in I love working with patients with eating disorders, adolescent, like young adults, and patients who have substance use disorder. That's kind of like my niche, but happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, and this is a 3-part series. So this is part 3 of Raising Good Humans. And we have talked about all different age groups, but now we're talking about young adults who maybe aren't leaving the nest as they should, right? Mm-hmm. And there could be lots of reasons for this. And we're going to cover all the reasons and what we can do to help our young adults transition. So let's start with, it's a tough world out there. So let's talk about some of the reasons why we see this in young adults.
Yeah, I think that's really a good overhanging statement there, because there's so many things. We're going to talk a little bit about the financial piece of it. And, COVID was a really challenging time for young adults. You think about what happened during that time when the 18 to 24 population maybe was living at school, the dorms closed, they had to come home, and adjusting to that piece of it. So, I think those are a couple of the reasons why it might be hard to get your young adult to leave.
I know. And, I have several friends who are parents, and on one hand, they want their children close by, but, 25, 30 years old, they're working, everything seems perfectly in order where they could transition into a new environment, and they would think they would want to, but yet they're still seeing they're very comfortable living at home.
Yeah.
Hannah, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the financial piece is pretty significant. And I know, I have a lot of clients who are just graduating college, and something that I've been hearing from a lot of them is they're like genuinely having a hard time finding a job. And a lot of it, from what I've I'm kind of talking to them about is that they're kind of going up, not just against other people that are getting out of school, but also people that have job experience and are just looking for, a new start. I think going through COVID, I think a lot of people, because we were all at home and a lot of us were working from home. And I think a lot of people, I think Brianna and I definitely see that a lot with our patients. People realized once the world shut down, like what's really important in life. And, when you're at a job that you're just not happy with, I think there's been so much more movement with the job force. And so a lot of these young kids, like we're seeing them, go out and try and get a job, but they're competing up against people that have already been doing these jobs for, 10, 15 years. And obviously that's a harder market to compete in, when you're fresh out of school and you don't have any job experience.
Yeah.
And let's be honest too, like the school debt that people are facing right now is astronomical.
It's insane. Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that must feel like to anyone, let alone a young adult.
Yeah.
And then, to buy a house or to rent. I mean, the amount of money someone needs to make to actually survive being strapped with all that financial debt right out of school, it can really affect you anyway, right?
Yeah. People are striving for this work-life balance, and you get out of college and you feel like, I need to get the car, I need to get the apartment, I need to get stuff. And the average apartment right now in Massachusetts for a 1-bedroom is $2,500.
I believe it.
And think about that added on to paying for your school loans if you have any, which again, the average now is about $35,000, $36,000 for a bachelor's. And you're kind of groomed to go on to get higher degrees so you can get into that job market that Hannah's talking about, to have a competitive advantage. And with the interest rates, how do you afford all that and still have money left over to have the life and travel and be with friends? And so it's a huge piece of why someone wouldn't want to leave home.
Right. So you're finding a lot of this, with your patients, that they're trying to maneuver through these challenges, right?
Yeah. And, and it's helpful for some of the aging parents, that's not always a negative to have a family member living at home who maybe physically, mentally has the capability to go to work and have a wage to be able to help support the household. I mean, people are struggling to buy groceries. We have patients that are diabetic who can't afford the food that they need to, or have the right nutrition to support a treatment plan in place from their primary care. So I think that's a piece of it too, with aging parents, grandparents, families living together in more of that compound environment. And they kind of need to have that help.
Well, too, I have friends that are concerned that they should be pushing them out of the nest. Do you agree with that? Or is that an old type of philosophy?
No. I think it's dependent.
Right?
I think that's probably, it's on it. I mean, I think it's a hard thing to just like generalize. It's probably on an individual basis. But I think you make a really good point in that. I think, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, we might be having a different discussion, but, Brianne is talking about, rent cost and, and then on top of that, like, and I'm not even a young, I mean, I'm young, but I'm not that young. I'm not even 24, but it's like my husband and I are trying to find a house, and we're kind of in these unprecedented times right now where you have a high interest rate and high cost of purchasing a home. And so I feel like even people my age are moving back in with parents or in-laws to save money, and it's pretty common. So I feel like I said, if this was before all of this craziness of the market, I would say, yeah, probably we need to be like a little bit more assertive with like pushing people up out of the nest. But I just think with how it is out there, I just think it's kind of like on a case by case basis. And I think we'll get into more of that like later, with people living at home more. I think we love, our favorite word is establishing boundaries in the house. This can be a successful situation. We can have it be beneficial on all fronts. It's just a matter of everybody communicating.
Yeah.
Well, in certain countries, it's very acceptable.
Oh, yeah.
In Italy, it's, of course, that's what you do.
Multi-generational living. Yep.
Absolutely. And that was actually why COVID spread so rapidly initially there, because everyone was living together, right?
Right.
So we're not even necessarily saying it's wrong to do this. Nope. Right? We're not. This show is more about, we're seeing more and more of this happening, and you're going to give us some tools on how to work with our individual situations, whether you want them to move out, whether they want to move out, where they want to stay, so that's really more what this show is about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You were saying like, shouldn't we be pushing out our young adults and the stance on that? And, I think the bigger question is, why are they home? Is there a bigger issue at hand? Is it more than the finances? If they're working and they're contributing and they're helping out with groceries and have a list, and, it's a productive, good environment, that's a totally different situation than kind of maybe what some of our listeners are joining in for is my kid won't get out of there. My young adult won't get out of the room. They're playing video games all day. They're not helping out.
Did you like my promo?
Did
you see that?
It's that. It's when it becomes really an unproductive situation and a scary situation when you have someone that you love and care about who really is not functional and can't do those things.
Right.
Then that failure to launch actually is a syndrome that incorporates more of the mental health piece of it.
Okay. So let's go through that. So we have addressing the situation first, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, and that's the difference between like a failure to launch syndrome versus someone who's living at home. So if you've identified that the young adult is maybe having signs or symptoms of depression and isolating, using substances, gaming all day, sleeping all day, that those things, if we have to address that first, because you can't push someone out of your home that really is not functioning at that level.
Right.
It's the support there would be why. How can I support you to help this underlying reason that you're here and that you have some of these fears and worries, or, anxiety and depression are probably the two most common reasons that would contribute to someone meeting criteria for this failure to launch syndrome.
Okay. Yeah. And so if you, so let's kind of go through some other things that you would notice. So I'm sure if you talk to your child and they're like, oh, I can't find a job, but you don't really see that they're making any effort, then what are you looking at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brianne brings up like a good point, is that like failure to launch and living at home are not like synonymous things, right? Like they're, two different things for sure. or they could be the same, but oftentimes we're talking about more of like, I kind of more think of it as like an emotional failure to launch, honestly.
No, right.
Yeah, I mean, like emotionally struggling with kind of getting to that next like developmental stage in our lives. But yeah, I mean, I think a huge thing that we've talked about even in like the last few series that we've done has been like communication. It just like, I can't stress that enough. These kids at this age, you know, you really can have more serious conversations with them, and they are able, you know, I mean, we do know that brains are definitely still developing at that time, but you know, these kids are capable, they're young adults, they're capable of having pretty honest and open conversations. So, you know, I think addressing those needs early, like, so, you know, for example, if your child is getting ready to move back home from school, most kids now are not like moving out of college and straight into their own apartment or straight into their own house. A lot of people come home for like a transition period. I know I did when I moved home from school. And, you know, it's having boundaries and addressing needs early. And that goes on both ends. I mean, I think it's hard sometimes even for parents to, you send a child off to school when they're 18 years old and they basically come back and they've been living essentially on their own for 4 years. And so it's kind of like this discussion of like, okay, what are my expectations and what are your expectations? Like, you know, we can talk about privacy. We can talk about, you know, respecting one another's boundaries. Like you can't just, you know, I would hope nobody would do this in no matter what age. I'm a big believer in like giving kids like privacy. Just everybody deserves privacy. So not like barging into someone's room, but you know, at the same time, you know, parents, if you're living under their roof, it's having those open discussions of what time do you expect me to be home? So like, because again, you're in their house, you don't want them up, you know, up at night worried about you. But it just all comes down to communication. So I would just say, get all of that out on the table before you even get ready to move home, so that everybody is fully aware of what the expectations are on each end. And you're kind of setting yourself up for a success in that sense. That way there's no secrets, you know, no hidden agendas. Everybody's aware of what everyone else's needs are in the home.
And Brianne, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of really hits the nail on the head with the communication. And if you have that communication from both sides and clear, easy to read, written out goals from both
Contract?
parties.
Contract?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
you know, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Why can't you have a written contract so you have something to go back to and say, see, you signed the contract.
And it makes it real. Like you can't come home at 2 a.m. and disrupt everybody in the house that's sleeping. You can't eat all the food in the house and expect that, you know, everyone else starve. You can't park your car if there's no parking spaces and everyone else has to walk. You know, setting these clear expectations does help to have a successful home life, because you know, if you're not in a good environment, it's going to suck the life out of you. You're going to be fighting, you're going to have a poor relationship, and then we get into those situations where you're asking that child to help around the house, they're not doing it, they're giving you attitude, they're swearing at you. And you know, believe it or not, like we see young adults who are punching holes in the walls, pushing their parents around. I mean, you took an 18-year-old, you know, male who's just leaving high school, and now they're coming back as a 24-year-old male who's much bigger, taller, stronger, up against maybe a parent who they've had that type of relationship with. And, you know, it becomes dangerous. It really becomes a scary, dangerous, negative environment for them to be in. And that's reality. These things happen. You know, it's not, these families are not in silos that are dealing with their young adults who have those behavioral issues.
I'm really glad that you're talking about this because I know it exists. And I think parents are afraid to talk about
Yeah.
what they're dealing with at home.
Yeah.
You know, so
It's
this is
scary.
quite common, right?
It's common, and you might have that neighbor who's screaming and yelling, and when their kids are coming home from college, or they're coming home with their friends, and like, as a neighbor, something is going on. Like, what do you do about that? How can you support it? Because it's something, especially in like our tri-town area, that like the doors close and like your lips are sealed, and and people don't even talk to their friends about situations like this. And when I bring that up, like, you're not alone. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and this is what happened, and like their eyes like welt up, and they cry because they think that they have to deal with this by themselves. And and what do? Your hands are really tied in some of these situations where some of these events are happening. And they can be extreme. They can be really, really dangerous, extreme, violent situations.
And it's girls too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You're like,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yes. Yes.
So yeah. So you have at this point, what do you do? If this is what you're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like back to the communication and the baby steps.
Mhm.
How do you keep people safe in the home? How do you break it down, as Hannah mentioned, with the boundaries? But you can't just make these big changes, because it's not going to help the situation. Everybody's so overwhelmed and burnt out from dealing with these outburst situations like that. So you just have to, as a family, do baby steps. I'm going to send one child, maybe with one parent, to the hotel. Like, we're going to talk about this. We're going to have you go to your grandparents' house. We're going to have a family discussion. Maybe you can't come home on the weekends if you're going to be this way, or on breaks from vacation. Invitation only. You're going to be invitation only, because if you enable the behavior continues.
Okay. All right. So, and yelling is not the answer. Yelling back,
Mm-mm.
no, makes it worse, right?
Right. Well, I think
And
too,
that's
like
really difficult and challenging for a parent.
yes.
That is feeling so out of control. A child, maybe they felt like they had more control over pre-college. Now they're in the house, and like you said, bigger, stronger, used to their independence.
But I think it kind of like, again, goes back to other things we've talked about in the past. I know we talked about this a lot last time, but it's the why. Like, why are you like, goes back to communication. Why are you behaving this way? Like, what is going on? I think of kids at this age when they're getting ready to leave college and coming home, are they in that like negative thought spiral of like, I'm going to fail. I'm going to leave school. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be successful. Where are they like really at? You know what I mean? Because I don't believe my thought is that nobody wants to act or behave that way. Nobody wants to invite that sort of drama or chaos or dysfunction into their lives. 99.9% of the time, it's because there's something else that's going on that's bothering them. And so when we talk about, partnering with your kids, or really just identifying what their concerns or issues are, then that's really how you support them, because how you support your kid is going to look different for every kid. If it's a fear of failure, well, you kind of meet them where they're at. Hey, what do you mean? Look at this. You just remind them of their successes. Like, you've just finished college. The number of kids that will have come in and see us, and they're like, I don't know if I'll be able to get a job. I'm like, you literally graduated top of your class from college. Like, I highly doubt, or I'll hear a lot. I used to teach nursing students, and a lot of people that complete those types of programs, you have to go on and take tests after, once you graduate, and, they'll say, well, I'm not going to pass my boards. And I'm like, do you really think you would have made it through 4 years of nursing school, all of this time doing your clinical rotations, and then fail the test? Like, you really think you might fail it first time? That could happen, but realistically, you've made it and you've done well. So the chances that you're not going to be successful at this thing that you've been working hard towards is unlikely. These are not realistic fears. Like, it's reasonable, but the reality is that that's probably not going to happen. And also reminding them, and I'm here for you if you have that problem, like, we're here to support you.
I'm just listening to you. You guys are so good. I'm like, why are we just not calling you every day? So this is what's going. Are you guys on speed dial? Like,
it's a journey. It's a journey, and you definitely, yes.
Hey,
you feel like you are.
Can you come over and parent my kid for a while? Please.
Sometimes we do. We get that. Sometimes we get that. Were you just here last week? Yes, but I needed you. Or, in the family, sometimes it will be one kid or it'll be the parent. And, it's like, I thought your mom was supposed to be here today. Well, I needed the appointment, or I needed this. And
can you come over for dinner?
Yeah.
We're all here. Right? I mean, if I were a parent, I'd be sitting here right now like, oh, I feel so much better. So, all right. So not all the kids, not all the young adults out there have bad behaviors they're having anxiety, and they really don't have a hop in their step. Like you said, they're gaming, they're watching Netflix, they're doing all the things. They're like, oh yeah, I couldn't find anything. Oh, I couldn't find a job. Oh, I couldn't find anything. What do you do with that one?
Well, I mean, I think in those situations, like, a lot of that could be anxiety driven, social anxiety, just as we talked about, like, realistic fears and worries. And, if you've been in your room for 2 years and that's what you've been doing, how can you expect someone to leave that and go get a job and go for interviews? And you are scared out of your mind.
Of course you are.
So it's,
of course, yeah.
Even coming out to the dinner table, for some people who were really isolated during COVID, they ate in their room, they slept in their room, they gamed in their room, and that became the norm. It really was not, I'm coming to the family table anymore to eat dinner. It's bring everything to me, and that's where I stay. And, so if that's the case, then it's, you know what, I'm happy to make you dinner. I'm happy to help in whatever way I can. But my boundary and my rule is you come to the dinner table. Mm-hmm. So it's starting that process of getting that young adult out of the environment that has sucked them in, because that's their safe place. And of course, they're not going to want to leave that. And if that's happening within your own home, how can you push someone to get into the job market like that? Then we see substance use. We see these poor coping strategies because they don't know how to deal with that fear, the crippling anxiety, the panic attacks. It's, you're doing a harm to them if you're aggressively trying to get them out of that situation in that way.
All right, because there's so many scenarios here that we're going through, right? So you've got, the kid gaming in his or her room. They won't even come to the dinner table and have dinner. They just want to hide in the room. Is very different than the aggressive behavior and the yelling and the, so that's a different animal.
Yeah.
But communication, from what I'm hearing, is the key. Understanding why. Right.
Yeah,
All
if you
right.
don't know the why, it's going to be hard to help.
Yeah.
It's with anything, because even though situations are very different, they're very similar, because that aggressive behavior that often comes with guilt and crying and fear and afterwards. So what is that from? And that could also be from anxiety and depression and just not being able to handle emotion. So
Yeah.
you can have multiple different scenarios, but the foundation of all of that could be very similar to from situation to situation. That's the baseline.
So now we're identifying that maybe the family needs help and it needs to bring in professionals to help maneuver through all of this. So what are some of the treatment plans and options that you have at Seahorse Behavioral, for example?
Yeah. I mean, Brianna and I do both psychotherapy and medication management. The approach for young adults and younger people is pretty much this. And for anyone really, it's always going to be the same, which is, number one, you always really want to start with psychotherapy. And the reason for that is because, some of the things that we've already talked about is coping skills, and medication does not give coping skills. If it did, we would have the easiest jobs on the planet. If I could just say like, oh, you need help learning what to do in a panic attack, Zoloft. Like, it doesn't work like that. So,
and you wouldn't want it, and you wouldn't want it to, right?
Well, I mean, if it could actually physically give you the skills, I would love that, but it's not really how it works, so it starts with the skills, and actually before it starts with the skills, it goes back to the why. So starting with psychotherapy is going to help these young adults to understand their own whys. Like, why am I feeling this way? What are the negative things that I'm saying to myself on a daily basis that is making me maybe behave in a way that I don't want to behave? One of the first things that I'll often say to people that I work with like the first step of psychotherapy is something called, it's a practice called cognitive behavioral therapy. And the first step in cognitive behavioral therapy is listening. And I'll just give that as an assignment. I'll say to my patients, like, okay, so the only thing I want you to do between now and the next time I see you is I want you to go home and I just want you to listen. Listen to the internal dialogue of what you say to yourself on a daily basis. And I would say like 9 out of 10 times, the patient comes back and they're kind of a little surprised once they actually start to listen, because a lot of times they'll say, I never realized like how mean I am to myself. Like, I say things to myself that I would never say to anyone else. Mm-hmm. And those thoughts have become it's like a well-oiled machine. They've become so practiced that that's why you have to sit and listen, because I guarantee you, all three of us that are even sitting in this, chat right now, they're subconscious thoughts. They're thoughts that you're not even aware are going through your brain. So it's about bringing them forward, looking at those thoughts, finding out why they're there, and then we can decide how to deal with them in a way that's healthy. So that's kind of
write them down.
Comes in.
So write them down.
I have patients. I'll tell patients, I'm like, get out your notes on your, your iPhone. And if you pick up on something, just write it down. Sometimes
generational, right? I'll put it in my journal.
Yeah. But there's also lots of great apps out there to track your mood and log your thoughts. There's so many great, there's so much accessibility to be able to write stuff like that down. But it really does start there. It starts with just listening and tracking and just paying attention to like,
and what's triggering it, and like, right, like
that's the next
why
step,
right, like what triggered that thought?
Yeah. And I
what
think
was going on at that time when that thought popped into your head?
Right.
It's like detective work in a lot of ways. I feel like sometimes you have to put your Sherlock Holmes hat on, because you're gathering data and you're looking at how parents are. What is their parenting style? How were they raised? What was it like for them? Are they mirroring the behaviors that they were taught? And at the surface, if some practices are like very quick visits, you're in, you're out, it's like that's how it is. And I think that's something that we do differently here, is that because we do the med management piece and the psychotherapy piece, you're unpeeling the onion. You're taking a layer off every single visit that you're working with somebody, and and you get the real picture. It's hard for people to tell their story over and over and over again, and building trust and supporting. And like you said, are you on speed dial for people? And you know what? For some people, you have to be,
Yeah.
so that they
Oh.
trust you to open up to tell you, you know what, like, I, as a parent, went 0 to 60. My child was looking at the remote control, and it broke, and they weren't really sure what to do, and I'm the one that freaked out, because I was like, I had my own issues of the situation. And and then they flipped out because I was flipping out. And so it's like, oh, okay, so how do we manage that? How do we manage that behavior? Because if you can manage that behavior and you're not going 0 to 60, you can actually say, okay, well, let me fix it. Let's work
Yeah.
on it together. Why do we both have to blow up? And then the night's ruined, and we're angry and frustrated. And again, the depression, the alcohol, or whatever it may be, as the coping skill, just isolating. You have to kind of start there, and then have the opportunity to then get further into like the CBT and changing behaviors and the thoughts.
Yeah.
But you need to know what you're working with.
Yeah.
Are there
And I
some
think
oh, no, go ahead.
Well, no, I just was thinking too, like kind of to kind of even just like loop it back into this like family dynamic and being in the home. Like, there are kids that there's a thing that we always tell patients to be careful of, and that's mind reading. And what I mean by that is making assumptions about what other people are thinking about you. And so, how many times, Brianne, have you and I like worked with a young adult or a kid that's like, well, I just know if I don't do this, or if I don't meet these goals, my parents are going to be really disappointed in me, right? They have these ideas that they've somehow created in their mind that if they don't meet those goals, that they're not going to, that their parents are going to just think they're a failure and a disappointment. And it's so important, again, to identify that first, because maybe even as parents, we're not realizing what we're saying to our kids and how it's landing for them, because communication styles are different from person to person. I kind of think of situations where people will say, I think this is something that we hear like a lot. Let's say there's one of the, like, maybe you're in a single parent household, or maybe you're in a household where the parents aren't getting along, or there's another sibling that came before you that maybe wasn't successful or got themselves into trouble. And, as a parent, you don't mean to kind of say this, but how many times have we heard someone say, well, you're going to end up just like your father if you keep this up. You're going to end up just like your brother. And it's not intended to be super hurtful or harmful, but what that child is hearing on the other end is, you think I am like this person that clearly in our family is identified as like a loser, a failure, whatever. And so again, once these kids can start identifying their feelings, it doesn't just help for them, it will help parents as well, because sometimes we need to be made aware of, hey, when you say that, this is how it's making me feel, and this is why I'm acting this way. So if you can change how you're communicating with me, you'll see a positive ripple effect with that.
It sticks with them. Like
Totally.
they'll come up with things that happened when they were 5. Like, do you remember when you like said this to me, or you didn't give me this, or they bring up all these things. Like, remember when I got all A's and I got a B and you didn't even care. You only focused on the B, or hey, you were like a loving parent, but I remember that time that I was leaving the house and my dad said, Sally A+ Smith, and you think, well, Dad's going to be disappointed with me if I don't get an A+, and that maybe have not been at all what he was saying. It's just like, you're going to do great and positive and support, and and sometimes I have like 60, 70-year-olds are like, I remember when my dad told me that and I didn't get an A+, and now like I let him down, but like, what did that really mean? And so you could say something and it can stick with you for years, depending on how it comes across, or how you think it might have come across.
And it's generational, right? Like, I don't know how many generations back, but I think each generation takes away something from the previous generation. So as much as you want to be a better parent, you might not want to parent in the same way, you're still raised in these environments and those things stick. There are many books and studies on that, aren't there?
Yeah. Because there's many like parenting styles, and I mean, it doesn't take too many child adverse events to happen to lead to depression and anxiety and substance use. And, it could be a divorce. It could be your parents fighting all the time. It doesn't have to be something like really that we would like a fatal car accident of a parent. It could just be day to day things that happen. And yes, like there's certain differences in how you develop based on the parenting style whatever you grew up in. You could have had a very authoritarian patient and very strict, and you're stupid if you do this, or you're stupid if you don't do that, and not very kind. And what kind of person are you going to be is different than the more relaxed and laissez-faire, do whatever you want. What's that person
That
going to
would
look
look.
like? And then like in
Yeah.
the middle, like maybe someone who's neglectful, what is that going to look like? And versus someone who is warm and loving, and what I say is what goes. What is the boundary set is actually the action that is set, and that's kind of in studies has shown to be the best parenting style.
And I think V, like you bring up like another interesting point too. You talked about, we all bring things in, we take what we learn and we try to change it for the future. And it kind of just reminded me of like, generational trauma. We see that a lot where, you have a parent who they themselves have suffered some sort of like adverse or traumatic event in their life, and that influences their parenting. Maybe a parent who was a victim of, God forbid, like childhood sexual assault, and maybe that influences like their ability to trust you to be around other people or be in other people's homes, and or just their ability to just like let you go out into the world. If your parent has experienced a trauma, that could be an excuse for that overbearing parent, but it's coming from a place of just fear and just wanting to protect that child and make sure that nothing bad happens to them. It kind of all goes back to like the psychotherapy, where it can be helpful for everybody. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Everybody should go to therapy for this exact reason, because, again, maybe you're putting things out there that you're not even realizing is really not even your kids. It's like, it's stuff that's your own stuff. that
Your
it's
inner
being
child.
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
it's really interesting because like we take on a lot of student nurse practitioners and therapists, and actually like today, like one of my students was, we talked to someone this morning who had a lot of trauma, was talking about their trauma, and and she kind of had to take a step back, and she's like, is this like what it's like every day, or like, how do you deal with this every day? And she's like, this is really bringing up things for me with like her mother having mental illness and being in that environment that wasn't warm and really was neglected. And she's like, I don't really know how to deal with this. And when you think about who comes into this field, was it someone that was bullied that doesn't want someone else to go through that, and they're
Yeah.
working through their own stuff. And so a lot of therapists and psychiatrists and providers actually have gone through some of these experiences themselves, and that's why they're drawn to that. Even other fields of medicine. My mom had a stroke, so I became a neurosurgeon because, I wanted to help people. Or my sister had a heart condition, and I became a cardiologist because I want to help someone else who's going in through that same situation. So yeah, I mean, there's so many layers. There's so much, and it's just, you can do so much good though, and you really can help your family by talking it through and bringing up these issues and coming up with a good treatment plan.
Yeah, I really love the idea of, having you guys over at the dinner table with the family, right?
Yeah.
No, I love this. I think unfortunately there aren't enough therapists right now for, right?
Yeah.
But if there were, wouldn't that be fabulous?
Yeah. Well, we do
To
home
act
visits. We do home visits, and you
You
sit
do.
at the table and you
I
have
don't
these conversations.
but you can come hang out with me and do
Yeah.
these therapy. We actually do that though. We go out to dinner though.
Yeah, but it's a different dynamic. When you're
It's
in
a different
someone's
couple.
home,
Yeah.
you
No,
see
but
it.
right?
You see different things, and I love going to, see my clients in their home, and like especially
Yeah.
with our geriatric elderly dementia, it's you see something as a totally different viewpoint. And we're talking about young adults, but a lot of those same behaviors happen when someone has cognitive impairment, and you're like back at the table at square one, like, let's set the boundaries. What's going on? How do we make this safe? How do we each have a way to deal with, not wanting to get dressed, not wanting to get out of your room, maybe not being able to drive anymore, but trying to steal the keys, so it really is. It's how can you best meet someone where they are, and do the right gathering of data to have the right, plan in place.
And then we have medication management.
Yeah. That's our next step, of course.
Mhm.
When we've done the psychotherapy route, and I always say it's never one or the other. It's really where the two roads kind of start to meet. A lot of times, sometimes what we'll see happen is we have patients that are in therapy. We have patients who are working on themselves, and for whatever reason, they're just not able to get quite deep enough. And I say that is actually usually for a very good reason, which is, as frustrating as that can be for the patient, it's actually amazing because our bodies and our brains are so incredible. And we have these self-protective mechanisms where it's almost as if your brain is like, no, we're not ready to go there unless I got a little bit of support underneath that. And so that's kind of where the meds come in. It's maybe the anxiety is just so bad that the thought of even digging deep into why I'm anxious, it's like, you can't even go there. So it's like, all right, let's bring a little bit of medication into the picture, treat the anxiety, treat the depression, give you a little bit of like, a floor underneath you. And then you can start to build on, building those skills, getting in deeper, figuring out, why you're feeling the way that you feel. And the number of times that we've seen those two things of therapy and meds work together. I remember when I was a student with Brianne, and I remember this, she used to say to patients, and I still do it, the same thing with her same exact hand movement. She goes, this is what she said. She goes, therapy brings you here. Medication brings you here. Therapy and meds together bring you here.
Oh, I love
still do
that.
it, but it's true. She's right. It's that's how it works.
Yeah.
Well, and I think some people that haven't been on medication are afraid to even consider it because I
Totally.
think they feel they're going to be a completely different person,
Yeah.
and they're not,
Yeah.
because it's a scary thing, right?
Totally, and we're not magicians. And yeah, people have adverse side effects. People have problems with medications and tolerability. And, we do everything in our power to try to pick the right medication for the right person at the right time. We do genetic testing to see how patients metabolize certain medications, what medications might be really like, we're going to give you a 10 milligram dose of this, and that's what you're going to get. Versus if you're a slower metabolizer, you could potentially get more of the medication, leading to side effects. And, we have this technology to personalize medication. So we're not just throwing out anything hoping that potentially you do well, because there are risks. Like, sometimes you have to put that into consideration. But honestly, with the young adult group, they come to us and they're like, I need something. Like, I know I need something to help stabilize my mood, or I think I might be bipolar, or why do I get so angry so fast? Why can't I control it? And
That's a
often,
big word too, right? Bipolar. Like there are these
yeah,
catch-all conditions that people self-diagnose themselves
they
with,
totally do,
right?
because of the internet. They like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I have this, so I need some lamotrigine because like this is for my mood. And
I
I'm like,
saw
well,
it on TikTok.
yeah, what do you know about that versus lithium, or my friends on this? And
Oh,
but
okay.
but oftentimes they're very self-aware,
Yeah.
and they have taken the time to educate themselves. And and it can be like a whole life change for some people, that when they're coming to you saying like, I want this, I want medication, I can't do it by myself, and you see that change, and you see that that medication helps them do the therapy, helps them meet their goals, helps them to get to that place that they want to, then that's what medication can help. Is that's really, when we're putting someone on a medication, it's oftentimes for that reason. And it does, like, they can be successful in other areas, work on the coping skills. I can't tell you how many times people are like, I'm so glad we increased that dose of my antidepressant, because I had, 3 family members pass away. I lost my job. This happened. And like, I don't know what it would have been like without it. I couldn't use my coping skills at that time. Well, of course not. Like, that's traumatic, having all of that grief and loss. So there is a place for it, but you can be safe with it. And we always try to do other things first.
Of course.
Always.
Well, that's why I've been so drawn to you guys and having you on the show, because I feel like you really want to help people learn how to cope and get the tools to address these things without medication first.
Yeah.
Yep.
You really, because if you don't have that foundation, I don't even think, medication it doesn't work, right? Like it's not even gonna.
It goes so far. It only goes so far. Medication doesn't fix childhood trauma. It helps you deal with it better, but it doesn't take it away. Like even negative thoughts, like it might quiet them down a little bit. It might quiet down intrusive thoughts, but it doesn't, you can't challenge those thoughts unless you are doing the work to identify them and do the work to combat those negative thoughts. Like I can't say it enough. Like, trust me, our jobs would be so much easier, so much easier. But
like a little tic tacs, like
Oh.
take this.
it would be great. It would be great. But that is not,
Yeah.
it is not the case, like, at all. And I think, there, like, I think we just briefly touched on, the aspect of like social media and, how that can kind of like definitely plant some seeds as to what people are thinking. But that being said, I'm going to use this opportunity right now to use social media. It's also very helpful because one of the things that obviously, we try to provide a high caliber of care to our patients. And I think knowledge is power. And so any people that are out there that are thinking of going and getting meds that maybe aren't around here, there are things that you want to look out for. Make sure that your provider is spending time with you. If you're going to do med management, unfortunately, there's a lot of practice. There's a lot of practice out there that kind of, you're getting a 5 to 10 minute phone call for med management. And if that's what you're getting, it's not enough. We can't assess how well a med is working. We can't assess the side effects of your meds if you're not being given that time. So you want to make sure like you trust the person you're working with, do your research, look and see if there's any, reviews available online. Psychology Today is a great resource. And I like Psychology Today and Therapy Den because the provider has to put usually like a biography and sometimes even like a video, kind of allows you that opportunity to see if this is someone you feel like you can trust. And if you do start working with someone and you don't feel comfortable with them, don't stay. Like, this is your mental health. Like, would you go to someone who is putting you on a blood pressure medication that you think isn't working? Would you still go to them if you go to them and say, oh, my blood pressure is still 200 over 100? And they're like, well, I think it's still the right medication for you. No, you wouldn't. You would be like, wow, you're not paying attention to me and you're not listening, and you would go find another doctor. So you should do the same thing when it comes to mental health. And I cannot stress this enough. Like, a good provider, our goal is not to take away who you are, it's to amplify who you are, and for us to help you feel like you're getting out there and you're getting the most out of your life. If you are feeling numb from medications or sadder or more anxious, then you're not on the right medication. Like, I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah. And if you're having side effects, you don't have to deal with that.
Correct.
There's other things that you can do. It's be with someone who is taking the time to know you, because that in itself mitigates the side effects, mitigates the risk to have problems with medications, and protects your brain. That's what we want for people. We want to help you, protect you, help you to make whatever it is the goal that you need to go, and then launch. Like, we want to launch you too. It's
No,
same thing.
no, yeah, get out. No. No, I have not discussed this with you, so I don't even know what your response is going to be here, but I don't even know how you're going to respond to this at all. But what are your thoughts on your primary care physician prescribing medication for mental health?
Yeah, I think that's usually where it starts from. Were they educated to do that? I think they often know their limits. Sometimes they don't. I think when you really start getting into mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, like, primary care is not your place for that.
Yeah.
There's a certain level, and I find that sometimes we're getting patients that are put on medications, multiple medications, that really can impact how the medications end up working. And that's why it is beneficial to, maybe if you've had a failure of 1 or 2 antidepressants or anti-anxiety medicines in primary care, don't try number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't get put on 5 different medications. That's really when you have to advocate for yourself and say, you know what? these two didn't work for me. What's going on? Because people get frustrated. People change how their brain is going to respond to other medications, especially with antidepressants. The more you try, the less they're effective.
Mhm.
So you take one and it's already, potentially
Changing
not
your brain.
that effective.
Mhm.
You try a second one, take away another 30% chance. A third one, take it another 30% chance. So you're really at such a poor place if you are in that situation where you've tried multiple antidepressants and none of them are working. It makes it really hard for us to do a good job at that point. So
Yeah.
And you're missing a critical step.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
missing the psychotherapy. You're
Yeah.
missing the learning your coping skills, because maybe you don't need medication at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe
Yep.
you just need help, learning how to deal with certain situations, So I've always wondered that, like, and listen, I mean, we love our doctors and we love our primary
Absolutely.
care physicians and all of that. But I just feel like sometimes, they're just prescribing, they're just doing it all as one-stop shop. And I've always questioned if that's the best thing or not,
Yeah, we have more
I think
time.
it's I think it's just an access to care issue. You know what I mean? Like I actually find most primary cares don't want to prescribe these meds because they are so busy. They're seeing 30 patients in a day. I think they're honestly, most of their times, their intentions are really good. They're just trying to save the patient the hassle of going from place to place. But I actually feel like, honestly, especially in this area, like this is where it actually falls on us as the end, the psych people to make good connections with our colleagues in the community so that they know that they can make referrals to us. We get a lot of referrals from primary care.
Yeah, because
we've made it a point.
Follow up. If you're in primary care and you get started on a medication and say you have a side effect, you don't know, you try to call primary care, maybe you can't get in for 6 months. Maybe they don't have any openings, which our schedules are built to manage that.
Right.
If I'm starting you on a medication, you better believe you are going to get fit into my schedule in a couple weeks. 2 or 3 weeks maximum, so that I can have you tell me how you're feeling on that medication. Yes, it might not work for 6 to 8 weeks, but you are not going to suffer in silence if that's not working for you. And that's not really, helping the situation, making you feel numb or making you feel like not yourself. Because yes, some of these medicines can do that, but that just means it's not the right medicine for you. They all will not do that. It could just be that particular medicine that does that. So that would be the advantage of coming into a specialist that would manage the medications, because we do put the time, we have the tools to try to make it individualized. We have the opportunity to do psychotherapy. We do hour-long visits, first a 10-minute med management visit. We'll cater to whatever it is that you need on that day. If you need 2 hours, guess what? We'll put our schedule to give you 2 hours if that's what you need for that particular day. Can we do that every day? It's
probably not.
But we really.
But for dinner, you might.
That's when we're coming over.
That's when we're coming over
and finish our visit.
I love you guys so much. I really do, and I'm so glad that I know you, and that you're. No, but it's true. You are such a gift to my audience and our audience, because people tune in for you. So I'm really grateful. I kind of want to dive into personality disorders.
Yeah.
That's
a good next topic. Yeah, let's go for it. There's so many.
There's so many personality disorders. Like I'm seeing a lot of, like, in Hannah too, like PMDD, and when PMS goes to the next level, like there's so much of that right now. And there's so many fascinating topics. So, and it'd be good to hear from the audience too.
I know. I would love to know what other people want to talk about.
All right.
there's a lot of PMDD going on, and there's so much. There's so much.
I know. Well, and all over, TikTok and Instagram and, but I think we should hit on some of them.
Yeah. Let's do it.
We're here for
I
it.
think that'd be a lot of fun. So, I have your website scrolling across the bottom. Did I spell that right? I don't have my glasses on.
Yeah,
behavioral.
It's a little off, but that's okay.
I think I didn't spell that right.
That's hilarious. I love it.
I didn't have my glasses
Failure to
on.
launch. Failure to launch.
You get the gist. You get the gist.
I'm like, is that an A?
That's funny.
Behave.
Behavioral.
Yeah, so that went on for an hour. Okay, well, we'll make sure we have the right link up so we can go on your website. If you guys wouldn't mind, any thing you can think of, if you go on the VTalks platform, any sort of links that you think people might be interested in, that would be super helpful. How would you like to sign off, ladies?
Just
wrap it up
as always for
wrap it up in a bow.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was great. I think this was a great segment. I'm looking forward to whatever comes up next, and just trust yourselves and remember that we're all out here just trying to do our best. That's all that you can ask of yourselves.
Yeah, day by day, I think just educate yourself, work on some of these skills that we've been able to talk about in these last 3 segments. And, I think, you do the best that you can on any given day, and you can't look back. You just got to keep moving forward.
I know, because at the end of the day, everybody is just doing the best that they can.
Mm-hmm.
They really are, with the tools they have in their toolbox.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, ladies. Well,
Thanks,
we'll talk again. We'll have some dinner and figure out our personality disorder series.
Love it. Love it.
All right. All right. Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, one more out. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in with Seahorse Behavioral and our Failure to Launch series. All of the videos are up on the VTalks podcast Facebook page, as well as my YouTube channel, VTalks Podcast. We've got about 3 years worth of videos, and but we definitely have, everything is updated if you look under the live video section of the YouTube channel. So thank you so much. And I hope we helped someone this evening. All righty.